Hi friends, welcome back. So I'm popping in before we get started to give you a little bit of a heads up about what you are going to see next. It might be a little bit shocking to you. I'm a very visual learner and I teach the fusion method on my channel here. And it's a method that I've curated and kind of put together in order to really help women in more mature skin, 40s and older, to be able to achieve undetectable makeup. But the way that I do this is maybe a little bit different than some of the other ways that you are taught makeup on this platform. But I came across this filter, which really helps me to visually explain to you the different levels and different tones of your muscle system on your face in order for you to better understand it and get that undetectable makeup application that is just so. All warnings aside, the next video is going to be a little bit shocking. It's mildly shocking, I know, but this is a really great visual to understanding the muscle systems on your individual face. So all of us are going to have areas that have lower muscle movement and higher muscle movement. And that's where we start to pay attention to the mimetic muscle zones. The lower muscle movement is going to be areas that can tolerate heavier product, like foundations, concealers, contours, bronzers even. So if we're looking in those areas on our individual faces, this area tends to have lower muscle movement. It's not as strong, meaning it doesn't crease as much, which in turn is not going to give you the makeup texture and the makeup settling. So if used lightly in these areas, you can have a barely there application. Each of us will be slightly different, but once you get to understand your own face, this is going to get you a better makeup application every single time. But in general, this is a low muscle moving area. This is low muscle moving, but the higher moving areas are what we're going to talk about next, and they need a different type of product altogether. Let's talk specifically about low zones today. So in your low zone, you can use products like concealer, foundation, contour. Those are all going to be products of 100% opacity, but because these areas have that lower movement, they're not going to get the ability to add texture, to crease, and to make your makeup look cakey. So as long as you keep those products in the area of low muscle moving, you're going to be just fine. I know that filter is really freaky, but I just love the visual, and I'm a visual learner, so maybe you are too. If it helps, I'm really glad. Okay, so let's start out with the low zone. Like I was saying, I like to use two forms of bronzer for this. And when I say forms, I just really mean two colors of bronzer. The reason why is because as we've aged, we probably have a lot of things like melasma, sunspots, age spots, hyperpigmentation, whatever you want to call them, you probably have them. And if you use the wrong type of bronzer or contour on there, what's going to happen is it's probably going to get enhanced, or it's going to look muddy and dirty. I'm sure you've noticed this if you've tried to use sunless tanner. Oftentimes that same thing will happen. So the trick to getting this perfect barely there makeup is only adding color where color is missing. So if you learn anything from my videos, it's that. Memorize that. We're only adding color where color is missing. So I'm going to use the shape brush. I really love this one because of how fluffy it is and it pulls less product. I'm also going to use two colors of bronzer. Today I'll be using Bella Bronzer and Tan Lines. If you need a color match to know what set of bronzers is best for you, that color match consultation is in my bio. Starting out with the Bella, I'm going to use the darker bronzer, which is the Bella, on my forehead, which is pretty fair in general. I don't really have a lot of discoloration on my forehead particularly, but I do work with a lot of clients that do. And usually that discoloration is more in this area of their forehead. So you would want to be adding the color up to it. And that same thing's gonna go for everything else as we learn how to identify our faces so that we can get that perfect application that knocks 10 years off of our life or our face. I mean, we don't want to knock 10 years off of our life. Scratch that. I choose to work with bronzer versus a contour at this point, mostly because I like the application to be very light. And bronzer in general is usually only about 50% opacity, which means it's not as dark, it's not as heavy as a contour would be. And heaviness on mature skin isn't going to be our best friend. So I do like to try to use the products in the right areas so that we can achieve barely nothing. We want it to look like nothing. We just want it to look like we're younger and we have amazing skin. Okay, so still sticking with the bronzer, I'm going to bring that on the lower part of, I don't know what you would call this, like my facial muscles over in this area where I don't have a lot of movement. See, like there's not a lot that happens back there when we're wiggling and being dramatic and talking with our face. But if you notice, I haven't brought the dark bronzer into this area of my face, and that's because usually as we age, we lose volume there, and we don't want to sink that in more with a heavy color, a dark color like this bronzer might be. So what I want to use is use something that's a little bit lighter in tone, a little bit lighter in the undertone and in the coloring, so that what I'm doing is rounding that out versus hollowing that out. That's a good trick to remember. Okay, so that color is on where I just need that darkness. So now I'm gonna wipe my brush off on a brush cleaning tile, and then I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna go into tan lines, which is a lighter, more yellowy orange sort of bronzer, and I can bring that softly into the temple area because I do want to bring in color, but I don't want to mute it out and I don't want to hollow it out. I want to lift and round. So again, bringing that bronzer in this area. Now I will bring a little bit more of this tan lines onto my higher cheekbone area, and I don't want the darker Bella bronzer right there because I have more discoloration. That's where I have a lot of hyperpigmentation, and I don't want it to look or get enhanced or look dirty. So I'm bringing that color in there. See how this is just adding beautiful natural tone to my face, but it's not looking like I have makeup on. It's just looking like I have really pretty skin and really pretty coloring, and you can have that too. Okay, down here, it's probably a little bit harder to see. Maybe I'll zoom the camera in so you can check it out. But I have a lot of discoloration, melasma in this area, and it's a lot lighter in here. So I only want to add color where color is missing, right? Remember how I taught you that? So we're going to take the tan lines, which is again, that more yellowy, orangey bronzer, and I'm going to bring it in just to the area where color is missing. I call this kind of like tinting and toning your skin so that it just looks balanced and perfect. And this is the trick. And I'm telling you, if you switch to using two bronzers versus a foundation, you are most likely going to achieve that sort of tone and that sort of balance to your skin without adding a product that is 100% opacity. But it's okay. If you feel more comfortable with a foundation, you can definitely be using it in these areas, but nowhere else. Next up is adding a little bit more structure and volume to our face. As we age, we know we lose volume. And contour tends to make women in our demographic a little bit nervous, and I want to take that away. I want you to feel really comfortable and confident, and the reason why you've been nervous is because you've seen so many versions of women talking about contour and placing it higher, placing it lower, placing it back here. And I want you to get rid of that. I want you to stop thinking about that. I want you to just focus on your face, because you only have to be good at your face and you only have to understand your face to achieve euphoria in your makeup. So all I want you to do is look at the structure of your face, and in the hollow of your face, everyone's gonna have it, even if you have a more rounded face or not. What I want you to feel for is the part of your face that if you were to drill a hole through your face, it would touch your teeth right there. That's where your contour is going to go. So we're gonna take my brush, which is dipped into my cream contour again. I'm using Indigo. if anybody has a question on that. So I'm gonna take the contour and I'm gonna tap it. I'm gonna use that brush and I'm gonna tap it right in that place. And I'm just gonna keep tapping it, and I'm going to feather it out and up. Feather up, out, and back, just like this. We're not pulling down, we're not going high on our cheekbone, because all we're doing is adding structure back into our faces so that we get a really nice lift without the heaviness. And that's the whole point of doing this, is to just be very light-handed and to work with it. Creams are your best friend. You don't have to be professional. You don't have to be a makeup guru. Creams are here to make you feel like you are a professional and make you get the best application of your life. Okay, let's do the same thing on the other side of my face. Just kind of plop it in there and just start working it back. You can use round sweeping motions if this is easier for you. The only thing I don't want you to do is pull down. Last thing we're going to do for the low mimetic zones, or the low muscle movement zones of our face, is to add a little bit of color to our cheeks. This is your face. It should be natural and it should be tailored to fit you. So what I want you to think of is, when I get hot or when I get nervous or embarrassed or whatever it might be, where do I flush? Where is the natural flush on my face? And that's where you should be focusing on the color for you. I like a pink. I think pink is pretty universal and it's pretty great for everyone. So I'm going to use that same brush. If you notice, I have only used this brush the entire time, but I'm going to flip to the opposite side of it, and I'm going to use a little bit of Pinky Promise blush. And I'm going to, again, start adding color where color's missing. I have a little bit of color in my face already here, and on my other side of my cheekbone, I have more color in here. So it's really about looking at your face and adding color where color is missing and just bringing that in little by little. I do think having flush up in the higher part of your cheekbone is pretty natural, but you just don't want it to be as heavy. So when you're working with a cream like these, you can just manipulate it and move it where it needs to go. For me, that is it when it comes to what I'm going to apply in the low muscle moving areas of my face in order to achieve the perfect fusion method application. In my next video, I am going to go over the high muscle moving areas and what type of products you should be using in there, because we cannot be using concealers, we cannot be using foundations, we have to use products that have less opacity. Thanks guys, see you next time, and be sure to hit subscribe.